Now, it seems obvious to me that racism cannot be fixed by racism waged against another group. Teaching children to hate themselves or others on the basis of race, I think, is cruel and disgusting. And yet that is happening in our schools every single day. And the only parliamentarian that I can find who's prepared to call this out is the fearless Mark Latham. He's the New South Wales leader of One Nation. I'm delighted to say he joins me now. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for your time. Critical race theory is political indoctrination. It is straight from the left-wing Marxist playbook, and it is poisoning the mind of our children. Is there anything more we need to know?
Well, it's got an origin that's interesting, Cory, in that the original Marxist theory was that working people were put down through the exploitation of labour. And effectively that fell apart with the failure of the old Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 80s. And the Marxists, the left, has moved on to a different theory of exploitation based on skin colour. But it runs counter to common sense in that every society has racists. In Australia, fortunately, they're very small in number. All the international surveys show we're a tolerant, welcoming society for people from all over the world, and millions would love to come here. So the lefties have moved from that theory of sort of a limited number of individual racists, sort of the bad apple in the barrel approach, to say that every single institution and relationship is riddled with racism. Well, there's no evidence of that. And unfortunately, what you pointed out in our school system is not just the way of students hating each other, it's being taught as a way of hating Australia. Because if you accept the proposition that we're an inherently racist country, it gives young people the wrong impression. It's not factual, and it encourages them to despise their very own nation, when in fact we should be building up in our school system immense pride in the Australian story and the Australian achievement over hundreds of years.
Mark, One Nation led the push to have critical race theory excluded from our schools. How hard was it to get the numbers for that vote, and did you encounter any resistance along the way?
Well, that happened in the Senate, and I understand Senator Hanson had a fair bit of negotiation with government members to get the wording right. But the real action, of course, is at state level, where it's the state governments that run the great bulk of the school system. The federal government doesn't run a single school. And you can look in New South Wales, where shamefully a coalition government hosts a website called Racism No Way on the New South Wales Department of Education. And it is full of critical race theory. It teaches all sorts of wacky theories of white privilege and encourages students most particularly to hate their country. The IPA has called it out, which is great. But why don't we see an education minister in New South Wales pull the website down and say in schools, build up pride in the Australian achievement, tell the truth about Australia, that we are a remarkably successful, tolerant, welcoming nation, and that critical race theory, it really has the same standing as other false left-wing theories, that gender is a social construct, Bruce Pascoe's rewriting of Indigenous theory, and that Australia has some leading role to play in carbon abatement. You know, we get rid of all the carbon emissions in Australia, has no impact on global climate. So the left, unfortunately, have become expert on rewriting truth, in rewriting facts, and indoctrinating students through the school system accordingly.
Yeah, you touched on all my favourite subjects there, Mark, but there are examples overseas. For example, there is a Scottish school, I think it's removed To Kill a Mockingbird from its English syllabus because teachers claim the book promotes a white saviour narrative. Now, can we have a look at this clip from the movie? And you tell me if the story about a white lawyer saving a black man from a racist mob is actually racist. Have a look.
Now, gentlemen, in this country, our courts are the great levelers. In our courts, all men are created equal.
See, Mark, the big problem here is that the lead character is not a person of colour, and that makes it empirically racist. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, why would you ban this wonderful work of English literature written by Harper Lee, the American? Atticus Finch did his best to save the black man wrongly accused in their court system. Cory, I spent my first 25 years of political activity in the Labor Party. And I believe that, and was taught by many great Labor figures, that the more white people that help black people, the more black people that help white people in our society, the better and stronger a society we become. Because at the end of the day, you want people to cross racial, geographic boundaries, class boundaries, and build a sense of community and solidarity. The left no longer stands for a society based on solidarity, where we look through things like race, gender, and sexuality and help people on the basis of their character, their work ethic, their community contribution. I would have thought To Kill a Mockingbird is exactly the sort of thing we ought to teach in our schools, not just for the beauty of its literature and writing and the story, but the wonderful example it sets of a white person reaching out against objections in his own community to help a black person. This is the making of the good society, and the left have lost sight of that, and identity politics has become so divisive and self-defeating for these people.
Mark, I've got to share this with you today. Antoinette Lattouf, who's a Channel 10 reporter who cannot see anything but racism wherever she goes. She put out a series of tweets. But a Channel 9 reporter firstly made a comment at 7:50 or something this morning that no one's getting tested in southwest Sydney. And that got this Lattouf woman who suggested the reporter was having a go at ethnic people living in the region, which of course the reporter never even suggested. This escalated things. A radio producer saw what Antoinette was doing online, decided to call her out. So she then pulled out the race card again, calling him a white guy. And the tweets went on, more and more irrational. This stuff is entirely crazy, Mark, when people can't see anything but racism wherever they look. They are the problem, though, aren't they, these people who see that?
Well, yeah, I don't know where Lattouf is from, but if she knew much about southwest Sydney, and I've got to say I know a fair bit about Liverpool, Fairfield and Bankstown, Liverpool in particular, having grown up there and been the local mayor, white people live in these areas. And if there was no one at the COVID testing this morning at 7:30 on a cold winter's morning, a bit of rain around, well, there would have been no white people there, no black people, no Asian people there. People of all races, colours, descriptors would have been absent. So that's not an expression of racism. The Channel 9 reporter who said, there's nobody here, is just reporting the facts, which I would have thought was her job. Yeah. So for Lattouf to jump in and say, there's a dreadful smear against coloured people in southwest Sydney, to say they weren't at the testing station, well, the first point is it was true. And the second point is that white people, all sorts of people, live in southwest Sydney, which makes it a very strong community. So Lattouf, I don't know where she comes from, but it couldn't be downtown Fairfield, I can assure you.